Have you ever had a neighbor who seemed to have nothing better to do than report every little thing about your property? If not, count yourself lucky. But if you have, then you'll understand my story all too well. Let me introduce you to the force of chaos in our quiet neighborhood. Karen, it was a regular Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I was doing something I found both peaceful and joyful: gardening. I had spent the better part of a week carefully selecting an array of flowers and shrubs for the front yard. Nothing extravagant, just vibrant perennials and native flowering plants to brighten the entrance to my old colonial-style home. It was the kind of garden that made passers-by pause and smile. But apparently, it also made one particular neighbor seethe. Enter Karen, the self-appointed guardian of the HOA rulebook. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. Karen had transformed micromanagement into an art form. If it wasn't a passive-aggressive note about your recycling bin being visible from a street, it was a complaint about your car being parked at an angle. It was like living next to a human surveillance camera, one that was always recording and always reporting. But this time, her sights were set on me. I had been living in the house for over a decade, long enough to have seen neighbors come and go, many leaving in part due to Karen's relentless oversight. My home, a beautiful colonial structure with white columns and dark green shutters, wasn't just a charming relic of the past. It was officially designated as a historical property by the city due to its architectural significance and the role it played in the area's early development. Unknown to most, especially Karen, any renovations, changes, or even landscaping choices required approval from the local historical society. This status came with responsibilities, sure, but it also provided protection. I couldn't just repaint the shutters or remove a bush without permission, but neither could anyone else demand I follow modern HOA landscaping guidelines that contradicted those historic standards. Karen, however, armed with her beloved HOA handbook and her unshakable belief in her personal authority, didn't care about the fine print. The phone rang early on a Tuesday morning, jarring me from a half-sleep. I squinted at the caller ID, Homeowners Association. "Hello." I answered, my voice still groggy. "Good morning," said the voice on the other end. "This is Marcy from the HOA. We've received a complaint regarding your front yard landscaping. It appears that it's not in accordance with HOA aesthetic guidelines." It wasn't shocking. Karen had a long-standing reputation for weaponizing HOA bylaws. But this time, she'd really overstepped. "That's interesting," I said, sitting up straighter. "Because my home is a registered historical property. All landscaping has to be approved by the Historical Society before any work is done." There was a pause, a long one. "Is that documented?" the representative asked cautiously. "Of course. I have all the paperwork on file." "Well," she said after a beat, "we'll need to review that. In the meantime, we are requesting an inspection of the property." I ended the call with a sigh, already bracing myself for what would come next. Before the HOA could even set a date for the inspection, I began gathering my arsenal. I went through my file cabinet, locating the original documentation from the city's Historical Society, complete with official seals and notations. The yard had been approved for native and period-appropriate plants, and everything I had planted fell within those guidelines. I even had copies of the correspondence with the society approving the new flora, which I had submitted months before planting. I was meticulous because I had learned, over the years, how easily bureaucratic misunderstandings could become full-blown crises. Still, I couldn't help but feel irritated. I'd done everything right, followed the law, respected the rules that actually applied to my property, and maintained the home's historical integrity. Yet here I was, being dragged into a conflict I didn't ask for, all because someone decided a patch of coneflowers and lavender didn't match her vision of the perfect suburb. On the morning of the inspection, I was ready. The documents were laid out neatly on a table near the entrance. I had even printed an enlarged map showing the property boundaries and highlighting the historically protected zones. The inspector, Mr. Delaney, arrived right on time. Middle-aged, with a notebook in hand and a neutral expression, he introduced himself politely. "Let's have a look," he said. I walked him around the yard, pointing out the flower beds, shrubs, and stone borders. Nothing was out of place, no unsightly ornaments, no fountains shaped like mythical beasts. Just flowers, mulch, and clean lines. He nodded thoughtfully, taking notes. "I understand there's been some concern over HOA guideline compliance," I said as we walked. "Yes, a complaint was filed. But I see you've got documentation. Mind if I take a look?" I handed over the packet. He flipped through the pages, silently, occasionally raising his eyebrows as he read. "This is thorough," he said finally. "It's clear you've gone through the proper channels. I'll write up my report confirming that there are no violations." I exhaled slowly, thankful for his professionalism. But I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Sure enough, a week later, another letter arrived, this one more hostile in tone. Karen had amended her complaint, now claiming that the flowers were too exotic and that the yard disrupted the uniformity of the neighborhood. She went so far as to claim that my garden posed a threat to property values. I laughed aloud when I read it. The sheer absurdity was almost impressive. This time, I didn't wait. I typed up a formal response to the HOA, attaching copies of the inspection report and the historical documents. I also added a warning. If this harassment continued, I would pursue legal action under local statutes protecting historical landmarks and property owners from frivolous HOA enforcement. But Karen wasn't done. She began going door to door, talking to other neighbors. I'd catch glimpses of her standing on porches, gesturing wildly, waving a copy of the HOA handbook like it was the Constitution. At first, I tried to ignore it. But then one afternoon as I water my roses, a neighbor, let's call her Diane, walked over and asked, "Is it true you're refusing to follow the HOA rules?" I blinked. "What? I heard you were making a fuss about the landscaping. That you're suing the HOA?" "I'm not suing anyone," I said, holding back a sigh. "My house is a historical landmark. Everything I've done is approved by the Historical Society. The HOA rules don't override city ordinances." Diane looked surprised. "Oh, Karen didn't mention that." Of course she didn't. I realized then that Karen wasn't just filing complaints, she was waging a smear campaign. I decided to consult an attorney just to cover my bases. I found a local lawyer who specialized in HOA and zoning disputes. After reviewing my documentation, he confirmed what I already knew. I was in the right. "She's overstepping," he said plainly. "If the HOA doesn't back off, you've got a solid case for harassment, possibly even defamation if she's spreading false information about you." He offered to draft a cease and desist letter, and I took him up on it. The letter was direct and unmistakably clear. Further unwarranted complaints or attempts to publicly mischaracterize my compliance would result in legal action. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was, Karen herself, flanked by two neighbors I barely recognized. "You need to remove the flowers," she said without preamble. I blinked. "Excuse me? You're ruining the neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you got permission from some historical committee. The HOA rules apply to everyone." I took a deep breath, then stepped outside to face her fully. "You don't have the authority to override city laws," I said. "You filed a complaint. It was investigated. No violation was found. Continuing to harass me over this is not only wrong, it's actionable." She sputtered. Well, we'll see what the board has to say." I raised a hand. "You've said plenty. This conversation is over." I turned and went back inside, heart pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline-fueled determination. The cease and desist letter landed on the HOA's desk the next day. Within a week, I received a curt notice. The HOA considers this matter closed. Karen, meanwhile, had managed to isolate herself. The neighbors she'd rallied were now aware of the full story. Diane even came by to apologize. "I wish I'd asked you first," she said sheepishly. "Your yard is beautiful. It's the nicest on the street." "I appreciate that," I said. "I just want to be left in peace." And peace finally returned. Karen stopped filing complaints. Her influence in the neighborhood dwindled. She was still around, still watching, but people stopped listening. Her reign as neighborhood dictator had come to an unceremonious end. In the months that followed, I expanded the garden slightly, within the limits allowed, of course, and even hosted a small neighborhood garden tour sponsored by the local historical society. It turned out many people were genuinely curious about the home's history and appreciated the effort I put into preserving it. Karen did not attend, but that was fine. I hadn't done any of this for her. I had done it for myself, for the home I loved, and for the right to enjoy it without fear of bureaucratic pettiness. The experience taught me a few critical lessons. Always know your rights. Documentation is power. Just because someone is loud doesn't mean they're right. And most importantly, don't let anyone bully you into silence. HOAs can be useful. They can also become tools for people with control issues, but the law and common sense still matter. Stand up for what's right, even if it means facing down the Karens of the world. Whether it's a neighbor, a board, or any self-appointed rule enforcer, don't be intimidated by those who misuse power. Know the law. Keep records. Stand your ground. Because sometimes the prettiest yard is the one with the strongest roots. Thanks for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories that inspire, entertain, and sometimes make you cheer out loud.